Mason Verger, the sole heir of the Verger meatpacking dynasty, resides in the foreboding Muskrat Farm, a mansion acquired by the family in the 1930s. His father, Mason, an influential figure in livestock production, imparted a unique education to his son. Mason's schooling was often neglected as his father made generous donations to excuse his absences. Instead, Mason personally educated him in the workings of the family's slaughterhouses and stockyards. Mason Verger, known as a daring visionary, made controversial business decisions to propel the family's success. These included adding unconventional ingredients like hog hair meal, mealed chicken feathers, and manure to the pig's diet. He also sponsored genetic research, resulting in the development of the heavy double-muscled Belgian swine breeds and various foreign breeding programs. Assisting his father, Mason actively participated in overseeing large-scale experiments. One such experiment aimed to determine the duration of animal deprivation from food and water before significant weight loss occurred. The Verger dynasty's ability to secure lucrative U.S. Army meat contracts, evade scandals and criminal prosecution, and resist union disputes was attributed to their business and political acumen, as well as their connections with organized crime. Despite investigations by renowned journalist Upton Sinclair and other reporters into the dangerous conditions within Verger's packing houses in Chicago, the family managed to avoid accountability. Shockingly, it was discovered that a couple of Verger employees had been accidentally rendered into lard, canned, and unknowingly sold to bakers. Yet, the Vergers skillfully eluded blame, bribing politicians to ensure their criminal prosecution never materialized. Mason lies as a physically disfigured wreck in his chamber. The room remains enveloped in eerie quiet, broken only by the hiss and sigh of the respirator that provides him breath. In the midst of this darkness, the room is illuminated by the glow emanating from a massive aquarium. Within its glass, an exotic eel moves with a grace reminiscent of a flowing ribbon, casting a haunting shadow over the room. In Season 2 of Hannibal, we are first introduced to the Verger family through one of Margot Verger's therapy sessions with Hannibal. She tells him, "Papa's will was very clear. Upon the passing of his beloved son Mason, in the absence of a legitimate male heir, the sole beneficiary shall be the Southern Baptist Convention." Hannibal's question, "What legacy would you leave behind?" serves as a prompt, inviting Margot to introspect on her own life. In this context, the suggestion of having a legacy dovetails with the notion of creating a family line, thus subtly steering the conversation towards procreation. Margot's declaration of not having a legacy is met with Hannibal's response, "Unless you make one." In the same episode, we get our first introduction to Mason Verger. In the scene, Margot on her family estate encounters her brother. Mason's greeting is nonchalant, asking about Margot's ride before delving into his macabre presentation. He introduces a baby pig named Pavlov and instructs Margot to greet the pig. Mason leads Margot into a barn where he has set up a maze populated by specially bred pigs. Mason reveals a hanging effigy of a person dressed in one of Margot's suits and doused in perfume. He tells Margot, "After Papa died, I had a Christmas epiphany. I had seen exotic pigs from all over the world. What would happen if I brought together the best of all that I had seen? Our father was a pioneer of livestock production. I think he'd be proud of my efforts. A pig is not like other animals. There is a spark of intelligence, a terrible practicality in pigs." The assistant lowers this effigy into the maze as Mason plays an audio recording of human screams, intending to provoke the pigs. Mason reveals the structure's purpose, to excite and antagonize the pigs, conditioning them to consume live prey. He mentions Carlo's experience in feeding a man to pigs in Tuscany. Margot realizes that her suit is part of the experiment, but Mason dismisses it casually, offering to buy her a new one. Mason's breeding experiments are disturbing from a psychological standpoint. The utilization of stimuli, such as the screams played during feeding, aims at associating a specific response with emotionally charged cues. The manipulation of the animal's natural instincts through sensory conditioning, association building, and the desensitization to gruesome stimuli creates an unsettling narrative grounded in psychological manipulation and cruelty. Mason and Hannibal's first encounter is an interesting interplay of politeness and veiled threats. Their meeting is in the same location as the earlier scene between Mason and Margot. Mason, expressing courtesy, thanks Hannibal for accepting his invitation, emphasizing his financial role in Margot's therapy. Hannibal subtly indicates that declining the invitation would be considered rude. Mason's pride in his exceptional swine sets the stage for a conversation that weaves between discussions of pig breeding and familial dynamics. Hannibal acknowledges the uniqueness of Mason's pigs, drawing a parallel between pigs and humans. Mason, in turn, details the intricate breeding process, linking it to his father's passion for genetics and expressing disdain for Margot's lack of interest in breeding. The conversation takes a personal turn when Mason probes Hannibal about having a sister, seeking common ground. Hannibal's response about having had a sister hints at possible personal trauma. Mason positions himself as a protector of Margot, portraying her as pathological and insinuating that she may have disclosed damaging information about him to Hannibal. Hannibal's reply, asserting his professional confidentiality while acknowledging the gravity of Margot's revelations, adds a layer of tension. The dialogue takes a dark turn as Mason offers a token of appreciation, a slaughtered hog. This gesture, while seemingly benign, carries an undertone of power dynamics. Hannibal's insistence on selecting his own pig introduces an element of autonomy, showcasing his assertiveness. Mason's offering of a pig from his gruesome breeding project, intended for Hannibal to transform into a gourmet meal, underscores the perverse sophistication that characterizes Hannibal's character. The dialogue adeptly maneuvers through layers of social niceties and subtle psychological exploration. When Hannibal draws a parallel between Mason's swine and humans by stating, "just like man," he reinforces the idea that there are shared qualities between the two species. The term opportunistic omnivores implies adaptability and a certain level of intelligence. Hannibal's acknowledgement of this similarity might suggest a deeper reflection on the darker aspects of human nature. The thematic connection between this scene and the earlier one with Margot highlights Mason's fascination with the intelligence and practicality of pigs, extending beyond their physical attributes. In the scene with Margot, Mason's acknowledgement of a spark of intelligence in pigs signifies his recognition of a psychological depth in these animals. When Hannibal draws a parallel between Mason's swine and humans by stating, "just like man," he reinforces the idea that there are shared qualities between the two species. Pigs, known for their cleverness and adaptability, become symbolic in Mason's narrative, representing a level of cunning intelligence that aligns with his own manipulative nature. Mason's interest in breeding swine with specific qualities is not solely about physical traits, but an expression of his desire to shape and manipulate traits in both animals, and, metaphorically, in people. The parallel between the intelligence and practicality of pigs and the manipulative aspects of Mason's character creates an interesting psychological tapestry. Mason Verger openly confesses to seducing Will with the specific intention of becoming pregnant, and her plan has succeeded. The motive behind this is to secure a Verger heir, ensuring that her brother Mason cannot disinherit her from the family fortune. Will, upon learning of Margot's scheme, reacts with anger. Despite Margot achieving her goal, she asserts that she no longer requires anything from him. However, she leaves the door open for Will to be involved in the child's life if he wishes, acknowledging the potential for a male influence in their future. In a therapy session with Hannibal, Margot candidly reveals the complex emotions surrounding her pregnancy. Despite there being no actual baby or embryo yet, she experiences an unexpected maternal instinct. Hannibal, ever perceptive, astutely notes that Margot has conspired with her unborn child to liberate herself, turning Will into an unwitting accomplice in the process. Mason, now in therapy with Hannibal, revels in his perceived dominance over his sister Margot, emphasizing his control over her financial well-being through their father's will. Hannibal subtly challenges Mason's authority by introducing the possibility of another heir through biology, disrupting the established order. Mason's assertion about their father's genius in understanding human nature reveals a certain reverence for paternal influence. Hannibal, however, challenges this perception, dismissing the notion that a boy's illusions should guide a man's life. Hannibal's reminder that Margot is the only family Mason has left seems to aim at creating a sense of connection or responsibility. However, Mason's response reveals a transactional view of their relationship, emphasizing Margot's love as a necessity for financial security. The mention of the Vergers as noted expansionists by Hannibal adds an intriguing layer to their family history, hinting at a legacy of ambition and ruthlessness. The line, "unless biology provides another," introduces an element of uncertainty, challenging Mason's assumed position as the sole heir, and introducing a potential shift in the power dynamic. Mason reminisces about walking the swine fairs with his father, offering a peculiar insight into his unconventional upbringing. The image of Papa's silver knife and the act of testing the thickness of a pig's skin with a stab reveal the Verger family's peculiar connection to their legacy in the meat industry. The dialogue takes a philosophical turn as Mason questions the consideration of a pig's happiness, and Hannibal counters with a reflection on Margot's happiness. This exchange serves as a metaphor for Mason's skewed ethical compass, linking the treatment of pigs to broader ethical considerations. Mason's discussion about Margot's attempts to kill him, her resourcefulness, and her potential pregnancy introduces a strategic element to the Verger family dynamics. The mention of heirs and loopholes in Papa's will reveals a calculated game of control. Mason's statement that he would have an heir only if he died introduces a layer of irony and dark humor. This self-aware declaration underscores the morbid conditions under which he envisions passing on the family name. In a desperate attempt to escape the Verger estate, Margot hastily packs her car and speeds away in the dead of night. However, her flight is abruptly halted when a truck crashes into her vehicle. The impact leaves her car demolished, and Margot, now stunned, remains seated amidst the wreckage. To her dismay, Carlo, her brother's henchman, emerges from the truck. As Margot regains consciousness, she finds herself in a hospital room surrounded by the incessant beeping of machines. To her horror, the figure in a surgical mask hovering above her is none other than Mason. Paralyzed and unable to move, Margot is confronted by her brother, who callously informs her that the doctor will be inspecting her lady parts and proceeding with a hysterectomy. Mason has eliminated any chance of Margot having children and inheriting the Verger family fortune. Will drives to the Verger estate and finds Mason sitting next to his pen. Will confronts Mason by physically assaulting him, then lifts him over the pig pen and holds a gun to Mason's head. During this intense moment, Will explains that Hannibal Lecter manipulated Margot into desiring an heir. Hannibal then seduced Will to fulfill that role and further influenced Mason to take the potential heir away from Margot. In his next therapy session with Hannibal, Mason displays a more dominating attitude by critiquing Hannibal's sketches and provocatively wielding a knife. He sits in Hannibal's chair, creating a tense atmosphere. Mason accuses Hannibal of interfering in Verger family affairs. The dialogue is an exploration of suffering, morality, and personal beliefs. When asked by Hannibal, "What did you learn when you were subverting the underprivileged children at your summer camp?" Mason, presenting himself as a keen student of the Bible, claims to have learned about suffering, emphasizing a detached perspective by clarifying that it isn't his own suffering but a broader conceit. Hannibal challenges the conventional understanding of God's choices in inflicting suffering, suggesting that these choices are neither satisfactory nor understandable to humans unless innocence is offensive to them. Hannibal's assertion that Margot's happiness is more important than her suffering introduces a moral stance, emphasizing the prioritization of well-being over pain. Mason challenges this perspective, suggesting that happiness and suffering may not be mutually exclusive. Mason's mention of his father teaching him how to hide things implies a secretive and manipulative upbringing, contributing to his distorted worldview. Mason introduces a symbolic element by showcasing his father's knife, describing it as a reminder of the past. This gesture serves to emphasize Mason's connection to his father and the influence of his upbringing. Hannibal responds with a cutting remark, questioning Mason's intent with the knife and humorously implying that Mason might be attempting to measure someone's fat, possibly his own. Mason's retort about there being no fat on Hannibal, requiring more than a flesh wound to elicit a reaction, showcases Mason's attempt to assert dominance and challenge Hannibal's notorious composure. The dialogue captures the essence of the complex relationship between Mason and Hannibal, marked by underlying threats, psychological maneuvering, and a shared understanding of the darker aspects of human nature. It also serves as a philosophical exploration, providing insight into each character's contrasting perspectives. Later, Hannibal is seated at his desk, casually sketching. Carlo and his henchmen abruptly enter Hannibal's office, informing him that Mason Verger wishes to see him. Following a brief struggle, Carlo uses a stun gun to render Hannibal unconscious. Upon awakening, Hannibal finds himself bound in a straitjacket, suspended over a pig pen in Mason Verger's barn. Mason, accompanied by Will, reveals a gruesome plan to lower Hannibal's feet first into the pig pen, intending for his pigs to devour him. When handed the knife, Will acts decisively to liberate Hannibal. However, Carlo intervenes, knocking Will unconscious. As Will regains consciousness, he discovers himself alone on the platform. Mason wakes up on a couch, finding Hannibal Lecter standing over him. Without warning, Hannibal places a mask over Mason's face and administers a potent psychedelic. Mason becomes delirious and experiences a euphoric state. Hannibal then gives Mason his father's knife and encourages him to demonstrate how his father used it to test the depth and thickness of a pig's skin. The knife serves as a powerful symbol of Mason's familial legacy and the profound influence of his father. The altered state of consciousness under the influence of psychedelics can symbolize a dissolution of reality and a journey into the subconscious. The act of mutilating his own face in this state becomes a symbolic exploration of the inner psyche and a loss of control or surrender to subconscious forces. The use of the same knife that was once employed to test the thickness of a pig's skin underscores a perverse continuity in the Verger family legacy.